What's going on, world? It's your boy at Big Game James _36. I'm here with Greg McGarity, and this is the Tax Layer Gator Bowl Drive to Selection presented by Toyota, where each and every week we go over the previous week of college football as well as the current week of college football and how it reflects or how it affects the Tax Layer Gator Bowl played here January 2nd in prime time here in beautiful Jacksonville, Florida. Again, as the weeks go by and the college football season starts to kind of come to a close, which it feels like it just started, we get more and more exciting matchups, and everything kind of shapes itself. As one of the good things is games have to be played. I would like to talk about last week's games, but there's just entirely too much stuff going on this upcoming week, so we'll focus on that. But before that, 9 teams in the SEC are already bowl eligible. Currently, I believe it's 4 teams in the ACC, 5 if you include Notre Dame. But I believe in the next couple of weeks, you should see them get to that 7 or 8 teams that are bowl eligible. What does that do for the Gator Bowl as far as our selection?
Well, for us, it means the pool is very deep. You're seeing that on both sides this year. There'll be some teams in both conferences struggle to get to 6 wins, but you're looking at the SEC probably will have 10 to 12 bowl eligible teams. And a lot will depend on next Tuesday on the 5th of November at 7 p.m., the first college football playoff rankings come out. So depending on how many SEC and ACC teams are up in the college football playoff will determine a lot of who we have access to at that level.
I was going to turn my TV off on Tuesday, but now I have to be tuned in because I do want to know. The most important thing to me is who's going to be in the college football playoff. Even though my alma mater has a record for the 4th time in my life, they have been disqualified from bowl season. But let's go with the SEC first. Let's talk about some of these matchups and what their significance are, because right now obviously there's one undefeated team, but there's a big log jam right there for number 2, and even with number 3, there could be potentially a 2-loss team that makes it if things shake out the way it's supposed to.
Yeah, I think on both sides the tiebreaker may come into play depending on who's going to be in Atlanta or Charlotte. But sort of elimination weeks. I mean, Ole Miss travels to Arkansas. Obviously, Ole Miss is on the edge now, but if they lose, they're definitely out. Florida and Georgia, same thing. Georgia can't afford another loss right now. The biggest game, though, is Texas A&M traveling to South Carolina. Really interested to see how A&M can bounce back. We know how well South Carolina plays at home. So there's a chance there for Carolina to get a big upset and knock off A&M.
Yeah, and we've seen in some of those games, we've seen South Carolina take Bama to the wire. Probably should have beat them. They've played everybody extremely tough, and then coming from a rivalry game last week with FSU Miami, out until the end of it was a little closer, a little tighter than maybe people thought it was going to be. Florida, Georgia, what is that matchup like? And you've been on both sides of it, so what is that rivalry like? And is that one of those rivalries where you throw records out the window because they're going to be able to play each other tough all the time?
Folks like me have long memories, but I think players nowadays, their memory may be 1 year or 2. Because you've got almost new players coming in every year that have never played in a game. So it is unusual. Georgia's probably played in one more neutral site game as far as playing in Atlanta this year against Clemson. So you've got some dynamics working there, but you got great talent on both sides. Again, it just depends on who plays fundamental football, who can minimize mistakes, and who can gain the momentum at the right time of the game. But I think it's going to be a very exciting game.
Every year in college football or college in general, basketball does a better job of marketing it. Then you have your Cinderella stories. But every year there's a team that just, that they stink. Their fan base knows, all right, we're just going to come here to these games, create memories, have a good time, something to do on a Saturday. They're so bad that you could probably buy a Whopper combo meal and get some tickets to it. Vanderbilt kind of shocked everybody, and what's crazy is they're not. I don't. That might shock our Vanderbilt fans, but I don't think they'll go to the SEC championship. But they have a chance for it. What does that kind of do for the parity of the conference, but also the saying that the Southeastern Conference is one of the best college conferences in college football, to have a school like Vanderbilt be able to rise up?
First of all, it shows that you can do it anywhere. Vandy has struggled for so many years, and they've got the right person there to lead them. A former Letterman there that loves Vanderbilt. They played Texas to the wire. Really impressed with the way they played and never lost sight of their goals and everything. They travel to Auburn this week. I mean, they are one game away from being bowl eligible. So I think it's a great opportunity. Of course, Auburn really played well at Kentucky last weekend. So Auburn's always a tough out, and they just haven't been able to put it together. But they're going to struggle to be bowl eligible this year, but it doesn't mean that they're going to be really highly competitive Saturday.
Going over to the ACC, you've got some matchups, and we have to get even more storylines. SMU's first year in the Power 5 conference, being one of the top teams. Brett Lashley, very exciting offense. Defense actually plays better than what a lot of people give them credit for. You've got them. You got Pitt, a story where you had a coach that looked like he was all but on the way out. Even because again, when you're losing, you talk bad about everything. That doesn't affect. That also helps you win. Your transfer portal's bad, NIL's bad, but he's flipped that and done a 180. And you've got the two teams that everybody did think would be in consideration in Clemson and Miami. Talk about the upcoming games this week, and just even what you think about those guys kind of finalizing and finishing it out.
Well, a lot depends on SMU hosting Pitt. I know Pitt feels a little disrespected. They're undefeated, but they're not the top 10 right now. So they probably have a lot to prove. But SMU is really hot right now. They played well. They're kind of the darlings of the ACC in this first year. You got Louisville traveling to Clemson, another test for their Duke going to Miami. Is Duke for real? Can they catch Miami on the rebound? We know they're capable of doing that, but you got a surging team in Virginia Tech at Syracuse. So you got some teams that are playing their way up, but certainly Pitt, SMU headlines the ACC this week.
Yeah, Syracuse having to get Kyle McCord back. I mean, that was an awful performance. That's one of those nightmare things. You try to say you can't play any worse than that. Hopefully he doesn't. Virginia Tech again has played in some big matchups this year. Had some games that they should have won. That kind of slipped away from them. Pitt and SMU, two contrasting styles, even though a little local flavor with them, with Cade Bell being the offensive coordinator at Pitt, played at Fleming Island High School here in the Jacksonville area. Pitt's always rugged, gritty, plays great defense. SMU, just doing the Pony Express in the air, doing it a little bit different. That should be a really good matchup. Clemson just seems to be doing what Clemson does. But the Manny Diaz Bowl, Manny Diaz coming back to Miami. His dad was the mayor of Miami. He coached at Miami. What do you think? What do you, as an athletic director, what do you tell your coach going back to where he was probably unceremoniously removed? What do you tell him? How do you keep the main thing when it comes to that?
Well, coaches just have to focus on that, on their task at hand. I'm sure there'd be a lot of pleasantries. I'm sure people appreciate what Manny did at the University of Miami, and some years had separated since they were separated there. Time has passed, and time heals a lot of wounds there. But I think once he gets to the stadium and gets in that environment, there'll be no question that he'll be all on board for Duke and totally focused on that. And when the game's over, I'm sure he'll have some pleasantries there, but it'll be emotional, especially going back to your hometown. Trust me, it's a time where he'll reflect, but more so before the game. And really, once they get in their routine, it'll all be business at that time.
All right. Speaking of the business of the TaxSlayer Gator Bowl, you talked about tiebreakers and things of that nature. What is your idea? Or what do you know of how the tiebreakers work in both the ACC and the SEC?
Well, we've gone down the list to gain an understanding of how all that works, and there's probably 4 or 5 items that you go down the list as far as head-to-head competition plays out. If you've got 2 teams tied, if you've got 3 teams tied, if you've got 4 teams tied, it gets into your opponents and what's your record against the opponents, all the way down to a coin flip. So nobody wants it to end that way, but it could develop to where you've got maybe one team that's definitely in. Let's just say that A&M runs the table, beats Texas at the end. They'd definitely be in, but who's going to be that team in the SEC with 1 or 2 losses that could play in that game? So a lot on the table, and some of this is out of teams' control. Even if they run the table, it may be dynamics there with who they lost to could come into play and hurt them or help them. So a lot to play out, but that's sort of the appetizer for the entree, which will be the college football playoff. So really be interested to track and see how all that develops.
All in all, right now, the success of these conferences and the teams being hot and the more ranked leads to a great matchup for the TaxSlayer Gator Bowl, played here January 2nd, prime time. Get your tickets. Even if it's going to be a high selling game, regardless. It seems like we'll be able to get some teams that travel well, play good brands of football. There's some great matchups that we're looking forward to this weekend, and each and every week we'll be right back here talking to you guys about the previous week and the current week in college football as it relates to the TaxSlayer Gator Bowl. And this is the TaxSlayer Gator Bowl Drive to Selection Show presented by Toyota. We will see you guys next week.